You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, welcome to a special episode of Power Athlete Radio. I'm joined by Dr. Ben Skutnik and Mr. Arash Soofiani, and we are here to discuss the Eat the Weakness and hit a couple different topics. We're going to talk a little bit about protein. I want to talk a little bit about compensatory acceleration versus VBT, and really just what it takes to get lean. As you know, I sent out a newsletter today that talked about bulking. So I wanted to talk a little bit about bulking as well. So cover a couple topics today, and welcome.
Stoked to be here.
All right. So where do you guys want to start? You want to talk on this protein deal?
Yeah, first I want to say, or I want to ask, Arash, what are you weighing right now? Because I'm still trying to chase you, I think, in terms of the challenge.
Oh, dude, I'm cruising at 240 and I'm eating an unmeasurable amount of pasta and rice.
God damn.
Yeah, this last week, Mercedes has been trying to buy my love with food, I think. Because every night we'll come back.
What's that like?
Oh, it's so nice. Last night she made like a little halo top with baked apples and
she's
spiced oatmeal.
She's supposed to do this before the ring. Now she got the ring. I'm just wondering how this is all working.
I don't understand it either, but she's trying to fatten me up, I think. But with the increased carb intake, all I've felt is a better mood, more energy. And I think once we got down to this level of leanness, and we were talking about it earlier in the challenge, we're like, hey, in the last week or last couple of weeks, let's play around with increasing the carbs and keeping the fats low. And I think it's really been working for me. So,
one of the issues we ran into, especially when you start dropping fat really low, is there's some hormonal issues, right? So if you're not doing some stuff to maximize your hormones, like, DHEA and, fish oil and just some of these other kind of levers that you can pull, I think if the fats go too low, I think we were saying about like 0.3 grams.
The literature will say somewhere around that 0.3 gram per pound
is kind of what you want.
Body.
Well, that tracks because I've been taking in daily fish oil, astaxanthin, and 3 to 4 eggs every day.
Yeah. So I think as long as you're getting a little bit of fat, I know, like I was telling you guys earlier, I had a conversation with Paul Carter about this yesterday, and his new hill that he's dying on is protein intake is way too overblown. He thinks eating a high protein diet makes people hungrier and less satisfied. And I'm like, everything I've ever read talks about protein making people more satiated. But he also did make an interesting point that if you push the carbs to later in the day for like a big final meal, you go to bed and actually have a better sleep experience. And like I told you, like I was doing the exact opposite. I was really pushing all of my carbs pre and post workout, and then was eating no carb, just protein and fat, and maybe like a little bit of Greek yogurt with like the fat-free stuff before bed. And somewhere around 5 or 6 hours, like I hadn't got 7 hours in a while, and last night 7 hours. So I don't know, I pushed it out and just kind of changing that. Maybe it's also change. Maybe when you get in the kind of the same rut, you need to pull a different lever.
Well, and I think one thing that we kind of forget, I would say Paul's probably not totally off base with his idea there, but we kind of have to look at it holistically and who are we talking to? So yeah, like we're almost 12 weeks into this. We are really lean right now. Our needs might be different than somebody who's just starting out, because also we are pretty dialed in either through internal willpower or the shit talking that comes from the rest of the group if we fall off, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're dealing with, whatever the equivalent of like highly trained but nutritional side people, I think we can get in the nitty gritty on that. But when you start talking about that kind of stuff to somebody who's just starting a weight loss journey, it's the math is a lot easier. Just say 1 gram per pound. Mm-hmm. And there's not a negative effect of that. There's not anything bad that comes from that. So, but then also most of the time when people find themselves in that place, they've been combating like the hyper palatable foods. Mm-hmm. And as delicious as a steak is, put some salt, put some seasoning on it, it still doesn't qualify as that hyper palatable because it's not that mix of carb and fat.
Sure.
And so we're also trying to break those habits. So if we
steak versus cupcake.
Right. And so if we load up protein, then that prevents them from access, or at least putting within their calories, those hyper palatable foods. So there's also that like neurohormonal side that we're trying to break as well. And when somebody's just starting, you don't want to get too complicated with it.
Yeah.
When you start talking about timing and how to backfill and all that kind of stuff, it's too much for them.
Like the way I look at it is, you as a nutrition coach, you're the co-pilot and they're flying the plane and you're helping them land the plane. And at the beginning of the journey, everything's easy, hey, like we're going to just kind of, reduce some calories. We're going to set the macros up and then we're going to let you exercise into a deficit. You're going to do this training and you kind of do it and they start making gains. And then as the closer you get to the runway and you land it, that's when you really need your co-pilot. And what's been great about this Eat the Weakness challenge that we've been doing in preparation for Hammer 90 is we've had each other to kind of help land the plane. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, like we were saying, we were stalling out on weight and then there was like a miraculous deal where all of a sudden like clicked down. But the okayness, I guess you could say, because nobody's really okay with just being hungry. I don't know if there wasn't some like buddy on the outside, whether it was you or Arash or, Matt or whoever's in our challenge. Like that's the support where it's like, man, I'm really hungry. Like, for example, yesterday was first day of school and the girls came home and Kate had cupcakes for them. And I saw those cupcakes and I just fucking walked away. I was like, I'm not going to eat those, dude. That's going to derail me. But in years past, I would have been like, did you get a cupcake for me? And she only got two. Cassie can't have one. And she didn't. And she's like, I'm not eating them. But it was pretty funny to see those and just be like, I'm going to make a beeline out of the kitchen. I'm going to go and I'm going to go ride my exercise bike.
When you're coaching people up, Ben, at the beginning, how important is weighing foods versus like using approximate measurements like a cup of rice or a handful of almonds? Or do you get into the nitty gritty on weighing people's foods or how do you approach it?
You want thick, sidewalk splitting slabs of muscle? You want to walk into any room and turn heads like gravity just shifted? Then you need Jack Street, the same battle-tested methods I learned from over a decade in the NFL. Claim your 7-day free trial at powerathletehq.com/Jackstreet and let the gains begin.
Yeah, so it really depends on their history in terms of what they've done before. If they're comfortable with that idea of weighing and measuring, then we'll probably start there. But if this is like true blue, like, hey, I'm trying to make a lifestyle change for the first time, it's just trying to make it as simple as possible. So I have, Harry Heptonstall actually made a pretty sweet infographic that I send them where essentially is a plate and it just sections it out. So it's just like, make your plate look like this. This much should be filled with some kind of protein, this much with some kind of veg, and this with some kind of like starchy carb or whatever. Because really, I think with all the information out there, people feel like it has to be really intricate and really complex. But especially if you're just starting, a simple change of really just like mindfulness, and by plating it like that, that brings mindfulness to what you're doing. That will change things because now you're actively thinking about forming your meal as opposed to, mindlessly just going to the cupboard or the fridge, just taking food out and putting it in your mouth, right? And so, if they're new to it, then we keep it super simple, portion sizes, and really kind of the first thing that I get to working with people on is schedule your meals during your day. Like, when are you going to eat? Because that's where people really get jammed up, I think, especially towards the end of the day. Breakfast is pretty easy for people to schedule, but then it's like, set a time for dinner. When are you going to have dinner? Because, how many times have, you got home from Six Blades or whatever, and it's just like, man, I'm starving right now. I'm just going to smash something, and you have no plan. Sure. Or you think like, hey, I'm going to make dinner, but then something comes up and now it's 2 hours later and you're kind of in panic mode. So that's really like the first step is what's your, timing, not necessarily nutrient timing, but just like within your schedule, when are we eating? Like figure that out. And then we can put together really simple meals with just protein, veg, and some kind of carb. And then the weighing and measuring we get to, because it's just like strength training, right? Use house money first, the basics, like master those things, make all the progress there, and then we can turn these other dials.
My parachute for late night panic is cans of tuna. And then I make like a little tuna salad. I chop up pickles and onions.
Sounds delicious.
Oh man, it's so great. It's like a little Mediterranean salad I make out of it. That's my little parachute I like to pull in case I get into a panic. Or a turkey sandwich. Can't ever go wrong with a turkey sandwich and cheddar. Just keep it in the fridge.
Yeah, turkey sandwich, and then the Mark's, what is it? Like Mark's Primal has that mayonnaise. It's like really tangy. It's like that like Primal mayonnaise.
The garlic aioli.
Dude, that on a turkey sandwich is like a home run for me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do like a turkey sandwich. What about one of the mistakes I see people make early on, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is they always just want to cook carbs. And I think like I've done that for years, being like, all right, cyclical, low carb, low carb, low carb. The problem though is you get extremely depleted when you start cutting carbs. And a lot of the weight gain that you see, weight loss that you see initially is just water weight. So I always look at like pulling carbs as like the final thing, not the first thing. And so when you get into this, it's like, all right, like we've been writing for this Everyday Athlete and ended up looking at all that content and taking it and like basically putting it into a newsletter just to be able to provide people. So the one that I sent out today had to do with bulking, and we're actually talking about leaning. But looking at and I appreciate you and Waldman sending me all those like protein refeeding stuff. Like when they overate on protein, people did not gain extra muscle. They did lose fat though, because the thermogenic effect went up, which I thought was fascinating. So in a sense, like if you overeat the protein and you're cutting the deal, but when you look at how people lose weight, it really comes down to reducing calories. You got to eat in caloric restriction. Now, whether you exercise into caloric restriction or you eat into caloric restriction, those are kind of the two levers. It's a lot easier. Like I just did 35 minutes on the Echo bike and ended up burning like on the Morpheus, like 475, 500 calories. That's probably about 2/3 of that cupcake.
Yeah.
So like, I think people look at it and they're like I kind of equate it out. I'm like, all right, dude, I didn't even burn a full cupcake because that cupcake was probably 600 or 700 calories.
Oh, talk more about the cupcake, please. Was it red velvet?
No, they were these like chocolatey ones with white and they had like blue on top. They were so good.
Oh, blue is so good.
But like looking at that, like, as I'm riding the bike, I kind of started looking at like, all right, like, hey, how many calories are in this? How many calories are this? And then mentally I kind of like look at the bike. But then as I'm riding, I'm like, shit, man, it's a lot easier to just not eat that food than it is for me to eat that food and then get on the bike and hope to God that I can burn those calories.
Well, and kind of going back to what Arash said, I think a lot of people don't know how many calories are in those foods. I tell my clients, so first kind of going back to what you said, my strategy with the clients is we want to be in a caloric restriction with as many carbs as possible. However we get there, right? Like that's kind of the idea. But I also tell them like, hey, if you're going to kind of waste your calories or blow your calories, do it on something worthwhile. And what I tell them is like, if you are a lot of times what people find themselves is they're at the grocery store and in the checkout lane and they're taking a while and they see the candy bars. It's like, I'm just going to snag a candy bar. Like a candy bar is 300 calories, like a Snickers or something like that. It's about 300 calories. And they don't really have a context for what that takes to burn off 300 extra calories. Because when we get like our watches or whatever that say calorie burn, they forget that our body's always burning calories, right? We have a resting metabolic rate. So that calorie burn that you see, like, oh, I burned 400 calories. It's like, yeah, but if you weren't exercising, you probably would have burned 200 calories just in that time alone anyway. So they're not ready to do that kind of math on the fly. And so, the whole idea with that mindfulness side is like, also become mindful of what these other things consist of. And especially those baked goods from the store. Flip over, like next time you're at the store, flip over the nutrition label and just look at the serving size and how many calories, because it's insane how many calories they can pack in a very small serving size, which is usually smaller than what we are going to eat, right? So it's a lot easier. And that was a strategy I took with Eat the Weakness, is I stair-stepped my calories down as far as I could. I think I got it down to about 2,100 before I started adding in more work, right? So we had our daily training, but before I started adding in that extra cardio and stuff, I was like, I want to try and get as low as I can while still just doing the bare essential training side before trying to outwork it. Because there's diminishing returns there. The fitter you are, the more work you're going to have to do to burn those calories, right? So it is a strategy to exercise out the calories, but yeah, I'm much more a fan of let's get control of the intake first, and then we can start talking about the extra training or what that looks like.
Yeah, no, the other cool studies that I ended up looking at had to do with like the non-exercise activity levels, the NEAT. Yeah. And it's pretty fascinating. The people that are, fidgety knee movers that, get up every 20 minutes and they walk and they do this. Like my wife, who's just like exercise bunny, like juice, those people stay dramatically leaner than the people that are more sedentary. Even when like calories are equated. So, I mean, they took like different groups and they kind of looked at them, set calories at the same, macros, everything the same. And then one group was like dramatically leaner than the other. And they're like, there is a actual effect of just being active. So I think people in their mind are like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to get on the bike, but what about all my other stuff? I mean, Arash does, jits 2 or 3 times in a day, teaches jits, he's up. I mean, his amount of just like non-focused weight training and conditioning, just from being one in the gi. It's hot here in Texas. You're working with these kids. You're probably sweating. I mean, people
definitely sweating.
Oh yeah. I mean, they just discount it. And I think that's like a major flaw. So just being able to be continuously active. And I always like Stan Efferding's deal, like, or it was Mark Bell that, after every meal, go for, I know it's Stan Efferding, like a 10 to 15 minute, just little easy walk. It helps with metabolism. It helps with insulin sensitivity, digestion and whatnot, just getting out and moving. And I fucking believe in it. I think that is probably one of the best ways I've done it. Just go out and take the dog on a short walk and come in right after every meal. And, next thing you've accumulated like, let's say 45, 60 minutes of just getting out and moving.
Because the dogs are getting fat too.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. Like when your dog gets fat, nobody's like, oh, we got to, do something for him. You know what we do? We just cut his food back. Because, we ended up fostering those puppies, which is a whole different fucking problem in my life. And so they're puppies and they need a lot of distraction. So Kate was giving them these bones, and then Vinny was going around and stealing their bones. So he was eating like these 6 to 8 treats a day. And all of a sudden I saw him like waddling in, and I was like, oh my God, when did you become a hippopotamus? And Kate's like, I think he's stealing the puppy's toys and their treats. So Vinny had to go on a little diet. And you know what? Like in 2 weeks, totally fine. Waist came back, everything was tapered.
Well, and kind of to what Arash is doing with his, he brought all those carbs back. One thing that we do know that we see when people get into a sustained deficit, you subconsciously or unconsciously stop being active throughout your day, right? And so this is the thing. People think like, okay, I scheduled my exercise, but then they don't realize when you're not exercising, you're just being sedentary. And so kind of like bringing those carbs back gives your body a little bit more energy throughout the day to continue to be active. So yeah, I think exercise is a great way to burn calories, no doubt about it, but it really is probably in the hierarchy of things for weight loss. It's probably like the third most important thing. You get your diet in check, you continue to live an active lifestyle, whether that's, going for walks or just getting up and moving around every hour for a little bit. And then it's the structured exercise. Cause really, I mean, even with the training we're doing, it's pretty high volume, but we're in the gym for 60, 75 minutes. Like we're not working.
I don't know how much volume it is in terms of the grand scheme. But the one thing that I figured out a long time ago, that if we can work to so there's kind of an inverse relationship, right? Like the heavier the percentage you work, right? The more intensity you have, the bigger margin of error you have, right? So like if you're lifting 30% of your 1RM and you need to do it for 31 reps to drive hypertrophy, whatever, and you do it 29, like you miss your mark. If you're, squatting, 500 pounds on the Hatfields and you're like, shooting for 5 reps and you get 4, like you're still driving it. So I think with writing that program, what I'm trying to do is give just enough feeder sets, like 1 or 2 to kind of get you ready and primed. And then letting you go a ham on that final set, and then making sure that we're getting enough touches on really the first set, like that first deal. Like when I went back and looked at some of Chris Beardsley's stuff, they were talking about like the greatest adaptation for hypertrophy comes from that first stimulus. So like if you do like, let's say 2 or 3 warm-up sets, the feeders, and then that like one big set, every set after that's kind of diminished. So what I did is I just put a little bit more, instead of being like, hey, we're going to do 3 exercises, we're just going to get maybe 4 or 5. So there's going to be dips in this. And so we get a lot of first exposures. And I think the one thing that I figured out, we'd always talk about if you eat a high protein diet and caloric restriction and you lift heavy weights, you can put on muscle in an environment and lose fat. And I think we figured that piece out. The only thing is just trying to be able to manage the carbohydrates, not necessarily for, let's say muscle gain, but just like sleep and recovery. Like carbs play a vital role in this thing. And that's what this has really taught me. But I think in the training, I PR'd just about everything. I ended up going 455 on the Hatfields the other day. And I was like, dude, I'm going to go 500, 555. And then all of a sudden I looked around and I was like, Arash had to bail and like DJ wasn't there. And I'm like, fuck, dude, if I get fucking pinned or something happens, like I'm going to be all here by myself. So I just kind of kept it at 455. And then, Matt sent me that 500 and I was like, motherfucker, I should have done it. Yeah. And then you sent me 480 and I was like, God damn it. But I ended up hitting 135s and 140s for 8s on the slight dumbbell incline the other day.
There you go.
So, and then yesterday I did, we were doing the bench on the close grip. All right, I had to do upper. So we did, you're going to laugh, on Monday, Jacob brought in the camera and we had to shoot a bunch of content for the demos on Train Heroic on the training. So we ended up doing a bunch of like upper body stuff. So I was kind of smoked. So I ended up taking yesterday off and hitting upper yesterday. But man, I felt like, dude, I ended up doing, I think it was like 275 for like just legit, I forgot what it was. Was it like 6 to 8s? And like really good pop. I mean, I could have gone 315 if I had a spot. But man, I'm PRing everything, which I know means if I'm actually getting stronger, putting on muscle and PRing, I think that's another thing that people mess up. If you're not getting stronger in the gym, there's a good chance that you're not putting on muscle too. I mean, there's some other ways to do it and some other levels, central nervous system efficiency and whatnot. But people are like, how do I know if I'm putting on muscle? And I'm like, if you're getting stronger, you're putting on muscle.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people just assume I'm on a deficit, so I'm going to be tired. I'm not going to perform well. And I think that's what all of us kind of threw out the window right away. Yeah. Right. We're like, no, we're still going to hammer it. I mean, and the other side of it is as you lean out, that systemic inflammation drops. And like I'm an early morning in the gym guy. And for the longest time, anything hinge related, deadlifts, heavy deads or things like that, like I'm just not ready that early in the morning for that. But like this morning I hit well, yeah, right. But this morning for the RDLs, I hit 355 for 6, which is a PR. And
nice.
That's because I just feel better. Like even with my sleep's been compromised too, because the low carb or whatever. But just my body feels better when I'm moving. And so the idea, I mean, I think we talked about it a while ago, but the idea that you can't make gains while in a deficit just doesn't really hold true unless you're talking about like getting stage ready at like 5%.
Yeah.
But for the average person, you're never going to be there. So yeah, you can continue to get strong while getting lean. And that's just like a double bonus because then you build that muscle, you have less fat. And so you catch yourself in the mirror and it's like, God damn, I look good right now, And so the confidence gets boosted.
Yeah, no, I was texting back with Jen Wiederstrom and she was kind of asking me, she's like, how's the challenge going? And I was like, pretty good. And she's like, can you send me, are you taking like pictures, like update photos? And I'm like, yeah, I got one. So I sent it over to her. And I was like, hey, I don't want this to be weird because we're friends. And she's like, it's not weird. I'm like, all right, we'll just make sure it's weird. So I shot her that one that I posted in our Discord. And she's like, man, she's like, I don't like the inflammation just dropped.
Yeah.
That was like her first comment. She's like, man, like none of you super lean, but like I could see all the inflammation. She's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, awful. I just haven't slept well. And she's like, well, you look way less inflamed. But I'll tell you, I don't really, like, this is another weird one. When I trained, like the next morning, I always kind of get up and have a little bit of body ache. I have not had body ache. I went and trained with Philippe and VH with like Nicky Rod, the B team guys, and I figured I'd be pretty beat up. I woke up the next day and was like, shit, man, can we go back again? I feel fucking great.
Even with compromised sleep, right? And that's the thing. We typically think like if you're getting poor sleep, you're going to feel like shit. And for how poor, because I've been 4.5 hours for the last few weeks. And it's like, man, 3 months ago, 4.5 hours, I would have been dead to the world, like not functional. But now, I'm still able to move pretty well, still able to train and things like that. So yeah, and you can see it in our faces. Like if your face, Arash, Matt, like we're all leaned out in the face.
Arash fucking completely transformed. Like I was looking at those before and afters, and like the only gripe I can make is the skin. Like so at your heaviest you were what, 360?
355.
Okay.
Yeah. January 1st, 2019.
Okay. He's like, I'm not giving you 360, 355.
Yeah.
So the problem is then when Arash first showed up to train with me, he was like 295. And he was like, what do you think in this? And I was like, we got to cut. And he cut down into the 250s and did amazing. But I think it takes time for that skin to kind of like, the elasticity. And some people get really, go get surgery and whatnot. But like, I couldn't believe when you posted those pictures, I was like, the fact that you look that skinny at 240 blew my fucking mind.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed the skin starting to tighten up a little bit. I think it just takes time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at pregnant women.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Kate was like, stretched out with twins, and she doesn't really have any of that left. Yeah. So I think it just takes time.
Yeah. And I think part of that is the mental battle as well. Even with people that, maybe they don't use exercise as the main lever, even if they use, GLP-1s as the lever to drive some weight loss. I think still at the end of the day, you got to be okay with who you're going to look like on the other end, right? Because we talked about that extensively.
Yeah.
You were like, I was like, hey, John, do you think I could stand to gain 20 more pounds of muscle? You're like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You need to cut some weight right now. But then I was like, what am I going to look like on the other end? He's like, well, you got to be okay with the surprise, because at the other end, you might lose too much muscle.
Yeah.
So part of the main theme of it was maintaining strength, continue to strength train so that we could maintain muscle even as I dropped, so that at least I had some semblance of a muscular look, honestly.
Well, so this is another piece that Paul and I ended up talking about. His theory, and this is like backed up, and I put it into the bulking email that I sent out today for the, what's in the mind of John Wellborn, or from the mind of John Wellborn. The leaner you are, the less systemic inflammation you have, and the greater the hypertrophy effect. So like, he was like, because I talked to him, I'm like, hey man, because he's like, nobody should bulk. And I'm like, if you're a high school football player, you're skinny and you want to go up and get bigger, like you got to bulk a little bit. And he's like, well, the leaner you are, which is I think what we've seen, the leaner you are, the easier the bulk is. If you're 20% body fat and you bulk, you're going to end up at 30 and you're going to be in a disaster. If you can get down to 10 or 12 and then bulk up, you'll actually put on muscle and size faster than fat. And I think the one thing which was interesting, when we've done nutrition challenges before, and we've done them with the Block 1 coaches and whatever, we've like leaned and got people smaller, but then realizing that they didn't spend 30 years lifting fucking heavy weights. And when they strip it down, they don't have the base. I think what was different with Arash is, one, he had been strength training for a long, long time. We knew what I was going to do with him in the gym. And we spent 2 fucking years just literally smashing this. And it's kind of funny. I actually had like a moment of regret realizing that in that 2+ years in that cycle that we trained the guys for ADCC, we needed to take more breaks.
Yeah.
I think it was just too much. And I think like for VH, it was, Philippe Philippe's like a golden retriever.
Yeah.
Like if you throw something, he'll come back and like, he'll do it as many times. Like, and this is part of the problem is that like Arash has got such incredible mental fortitude that like it's true. Just like I'll keep fucking showing up sled dog. And then you got Philippe, who's like the golden retriever, where it's like just fucking throw it and I'll keep bringing it back. And I think with VH, like he was in that deal. And I just think that like I needed to give just more breaks. There needed to be like every 4 to 6 weeks, we needed to take like a week off, a deload, because we didn't really. They showed up and we fucking hammered. And because the way I looked at it is like, if you're getting ready for the biggest contest, and I think what happened was when we had the training was so severe on both the mat and everybody wanting this. I just think that like, I think
also part of the thought process is also a linear progression, right? You take somebody with such a low training age that we could continue to see some linear progress.
And they did.
And they did. But I think to your point, it was at one point, maybe a year and a half in, that would have been the good time to be like, all right, let's back off a little bit. Let's adjust a little bit. But for instance, Philippe now he's gotten to the point where he can touch the weights 2 to 3 times a week and still get some stimulus. And I think he's actually coming to his own. It was funny. He just posted a picture of when he just got here and his face was 2 times the size.
Yeah.
You know, and then seeing him now, it's like he actually has his man body now.
Yeah.
You know,
I watched both he and VH go from like physical immaturity to fucking monsters.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when Shanji brought him in, he's like, oh yeah, they're professional athletes. They're professionals. They've lifted weights. And then they came in that first day and I'm like, man, they never lifted weights. And we started like, and because, I'm thinking like, oh, these guys are fucking pros. This guy's like, the best. I mean, let's go. And then I was like, man, these guys are true beginners. And then we figured out, and there were a lot of mistakes that I made, obviously, but like end up figuring out, and this was, pretty interesting. If I run into something that's a little confusing, I reach out. I got like you and Waldman and, Tom and different people to reach out to and be like, hey, what do you think of this and this and this? And they'll send me stuff and then I got to read it. But like there was a pretty interesting thing with like that came from Dr. Kramer in his book where they talked about higher order decision making on the brain, the heavier the weight. So when you start getting over like 80, 85%, 90%, like you end up reaching different kind of levels in the brain, like accessing different cortex. And like those high decision-making ones happen under a heavy load where all of a sudden you get underneath it and like you feel the weight and all of a sudden you like kind of click out of your like normal brain and you get into this like survival mode, like that reaches into it. And heavy force ended up being like the magic number for what we were starting to do. So everything became like a heavy 4, linear progression, heavy 4, heavy 4, heavy 4. And that ended up just paying massive fucking dividends. But then realizing, and this is another one, when you talk to your athletes, like the guys would get on the bike and, we're doing superhuman protocol too. I'd always go talk like, how you feeling? Everybody was like, yeah, we're fine. And so there was no like, but that's also what I call the silent Brazilian. Right? No,
well, that's just high performers, right? High perform. Like, what are they going to do?
Say, hey, it's coach, just what, like this joke that we have where I call it the silent Brazilian, and those guys are just like it. It's not in their nature to complain. Like I've never heard Philippe in all of the years that I've known him be like, I'm like always like, how are you doing? How's everything? Everything's great. I love everything.
Even if he looks down at the ground, he's like, coach, I'm doing great today.
He's like, I love you. It's great to see you. Right. Yeah. Like when I was at the B team, we were warming up. He came in a little late and he saw me and his eyes lit up. He's like, oh, I'm so happy you're here. And like he Philippe is really chicken soup for my soul. Like if those puppies are for my kids, like Philippe and the guys and seeing you and VH is good for me. But there was a little bit of mistake, but I'll tell you, we were also doing diet. We were doing the cyclical low carb with Victor just because he, was packing a lot of like, kind of those areas for insulin sensitivity. Philippe, we ended up putting on, he ended up going up 20 pounds and then we cut him back down to like 190 something and like just fucking looked amazing. So, I mean, he bulked into it. And then when we cut him, but he did it right, ate a ton of carbs, started doing a bunch of extra. He was training 3 times a day with weights. So, and they were at the right age, 25 years old is the fucking golden number. Yeah.
No, that while you were talking about that reminded me, I needed to tell you. So my wife and I train at the same time. She's following Jack Street and this is her 3rd cycle on Jack Street. So she did Shadow and then what was before Shadow? Force. And so now she's in this cycle. And so she was doing her bent over rows today. And she turned to me and we work out with our headphones on because the girls are asleep. So we can't have the music going. And she turns to me and he's like, take your headphones off. I'm like, what's up? Because I'm kind of training right now and I don't want to be bothered. And she was like, why doesn't everybody do Jack Street? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I have muscles. And she's been training for a long time. She's like, I have muscles that I've never had before. And I was like, that's from lifting heavy weights. Yeah, like you've never lifted heavy weights this much. And she's like, well, I have. It's like, no, you did, kind of the CrossFit thing. Maybe you touched a heavy barbell once or twice a week, maybe for one lift. And so it's really interesting watching her kind of go through this like understanding of training transformation of like, oh, this is how I get the body that I want. Because we hear with a lot of women, it's like, well, I don't want to get big. And it's like, there's a lot of things that are going to prevent you from getting big, but you want to look strong. You want to look muscular. And so she had that epiphany today. And I was like, I got to tell John that.
Well, there's, there, like, as I was obviously digging in on some of this like hypertrophy stuff, just because I feel like the amount of research that we can access is really good. And, Waldman sends me all this stuff. There was like a pretty interesting one that talked about different rep ranges. And part of the reason I dug into that is because Paul's like, nobody needs to do more than 6 or 8 reps. And I was like, I disagree. I think that there's different stimuluses and there's different like appearances. And I think you have to like train within the spectrum. And then his homeboy, like I said, Chris Beardsley, put out like a little infograph that showed like 1 to 4, 5 to 8, and then like 12 to 15. And was like, basically if you want to physically be developed in a way that's, the most advantageous way, you need to be able to sprinkle in all of these different rep ranges. And when I like kind of looked at the recommendations and then went and looked back at like Jack Street and Grindstone and all of the training programs, like our shit fits like a glove. Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of neat over time. And part of the reason I'm like, just to give you guys a heads up that I'm just not some egghead who's reading this, is because for the everyday athlete thing we're doing for SI, they wanted a lot of like strength training, performance, longevity articles. So I've been doing a bunch of those and trying to get everybody to do that stuff. And like, there's some really good research that you can go through in aggregate and like, hey, this is what this one says to support it, and it's link backs. But digging through that stuff, I realized it's always nice to like get all this cutting edge research and then realize that a program like Jack Street and Grindstone, which is kind of a choose your own adventure, minimal effective dose. But for a lot of the guys that are, let's say shift workers or dad or even doing jits, Grindstone fucking ramps people up too. I mean, if, and at the end of the day, if you're doing everything, like it tends to work. But I think one of the caveats here is, if you look at a program and it's just like 4 to 6, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, and it's just like this, and you don't vary those rep ranges, one, it gets boring as fuck.
Yeah.
And two, like yesterday when I was doing the dips, it was just body weight dips. I ended up banging out on my first set. I banged out 30 dips.
Damn.
I was like, I fucking did 30 body weight because we've been doing like up to like 60 and 80 pounds and change for 8s. And I was like, so I did like 10 reverse shrugs and then I fucking banged out 30. And I was like, I've never been able to do 30 dips. Like either I got really light in the ass or I'm getting really strong, but like all these little markers are improving.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just simple math, right? But you have to run the math long enough for it to take effect. And so that lack of monotony, right? People, it's like, is it muscle confusion? It's like, no, it's just boring doing the same thing over and over. So we switch it up. And that's when we've talked about, Hammer 90, porting this training into Hammer 90. You guys have equipment there that I don't have, but it's easy for me, just from what I know and what I've studied and stuff, to say like, okay, I don't have, I don't have a belt squat. It's like, well, so what are we trying to do? We're trying to load the legs up without axial loading. It's like, I can figure that out. Or I don't have a leg press. It's like, well, we're trying to bang something on the quads. Like I can do a cyclist squat instead. Yeah. But we change those movements up, not for like muscle confusion or anything, but it's just like, you can only do so many leg extensions before you never want to do leg extensions again. I remember Tom Newman said that if you vary a movement by 3 degrees, it's a different muscle. It's a different training stimulus. So like chaining different anything, like, whether it be your hands, your feet, whatever. All right. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about compensatory acceleration versus VBT, because that's going to be actually, I read all the stuff on the Discord. If you guys are following a Power Athlete program and you're not in the Discord, you are missing out. So if you want to do it, jump in the feeds, get to the newsletter, whatever it is, and we'll get you into that Discord. But it's pretty active. And there was a really killer discussion where people were asking about what should they be measuring their compensatory acceleration, because I list CAT as one of the training, which is our speed work. Like, what's the number they need to be hitting for velocity-based training? And I didn't realize, as I was reading through that whole thread, I realized that like people are just kind of like interchanging CAT with VBT, and it's 2 different outcomes. It's 2 different stimuluses. It's 2 different focuses. Yeah. And it was a great discussion. I thought, MCK, said a lot of stuff from the speed side. Sullivan jumped in there talking about the stuff he's doing with his athletes and stuff. So I thought that was, the nerd in me, the strength nerd in me was like very happy to see that conversation. But yeah, it's interesting because they're really similar, So it's easy to kind of swap them out, but they're two distinct different things, you know? And so, yeah, let's dive into that.
All right. So for those of you guys who are not in the know, and I'm sure Mr. Soofiani knows exactly what I'm talking about because Arash is a super fucking switched on human being and former strength coach. So he knows all about this as much as anybody. But let me pull it up.
Yeah, actually my first strength and conditioning experiences were at Stanford. So we had to learn how to use VBT like day 3.
Oh,
so I was like, okay, well, let's run it. They're like, oh yeah, make sure everybody's moving faster than 0.3 meters per second. All right, great.
All right. So what I wrote about is compensatory acceleration, also known as CAT, is about intent. You move the bar as fast as possible during the lift with excellent technique and control, even with lighter weights to generate higher force output. The goal is to maximize acceleration to mimic the force needed to move heavier weights. So like there's no tech that's required. It's just effort, intent, and focus. So what you're looking to do is control the eccentric, smooth accentuation phase. And then you're working on driving out into the concentric. And the goal is as mechanical advantage increases, so is speed. And what we see a lot of people do is they're very like calm at the accentuation phase. And then they slowly kind of come up. And then at the very end, they like want to shoot themselves up and like get up into a calf race. And the idea, obviously this comes from Dr. Fred Hatfield. When we talked to Fred extensively, and then when I did a podcast with him before he passed away, one of the key things was he's like, people don't realize, one, if you want to be extremely dynamic in the concentric, you got to speed up the eccentric, right? So the eccentric has to be a little faster. And if the eccentric's faster, the accentuation phase is going to be faster and the concentric's faster. And he goes, it's very few people that can go slow eccentric, slow accentuation phase, and then be able to move it. So the idea, though, is I'm going to intend to drive as much force into the bar as possible. So I'm literally trying to like drive out of it and stand up. Whereas and the core idea is force is equal mass times acceleration the weight through the entire concentric phase. We're building power and intent. And it doesn't always have to be heavy, but you have to train it at like the lighter weights so that when it gets heavy, it's automatic. Whereas VBT, on the other hand, adds data to discipline, to your discipline, using devices like the push bands and the wear to track your actual velocity of a lift, which is giving you feedback to help you dial in the exact load, monitor fatigue, and then ensure that the training is in your correct velocity zone. And I'll tip that to Brian Mann.
So. Yeah. But, and Arash, I'd be interested to hear, because you were at Stanford, what was that, 10 years ago or so?
Oh, dude, no, that was like, that was actually 2019. Yeah.
Okay.
The start of 2019 for 6 months. So till June 2019. 6
years.
Yeah.
I mean, even back then at because just observing some of the weight rooms I've been at and the universities I've been at, it seemed to me, so like velocity-based training in theory is a great thing, but what I would see a lot of was athletes chasing a number, so then manipulating their movement to attain that number.
Right.
And then it's like, well, what are we doing here? And the training is supposed to help facilitate performance. The training it's not supposed to be targeted for a metric. And so when we introduce VBT, I do it in the garage. I have a Rep 1 unit so I can measure my stuff, but it's almost like my sleep scores on my watch. Like first I want to wake up and how did I feel? Like how am I feeling right now? And then I'll use those scores to see if I align with what those are saying. And I think that's kind of how I treat VBT too. It's like, oh, you're trying to move fast. So move fast, do the movement fast. And then let's see if your idea of fast matches this number that we're trying to get.
Yeah. If anything, it's a moderator to make sure that athletes weren't loading too heavy. So they were moving too slow. But yeah, they started to get into more of like a gamified mode where they were trying to, either short up their squat so that they can move faster on the way up. And then you would have to coach them up on depth. So I do think it was great in terms of like the initial phase, but we kind of want to get them out of that so they can intuitively understand what moving quickly is. And shout out to Sean Waxman, my first strength coach. He is like the best determinant of the speed is the coach's eyes on the bar. So he was real old school, but he would be watching bar speed all the time, just looking at you from the side, and you could tell if you were moving slow or fast that day, right? And And then he would ask you like, hey, how'd that feel? It'd be like, oh man, that moved slow. He's like, oh, that moved actually pretty quick today. And it was constantly educating the athlete on what their actual speed was. Similar to like when you're coaching up an athlete on any particular technique in any sport, is telling them what position to be in or how fast to throw their arm to achieve a throw or something like that. I think the coaching is where coaching either from the outside or recording yourself and watching yourself lift is going to be the most beneficial to understanding what your true bar speed is. If we're saying, hey, you're going to move this heavy weight as fast as you can, it shouldn't look like you're grinding out your 1 rep max on every single rep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with another thing that people kind of, people don't know what they don't know. And Brian Mann did a great job with his APRE stuff and giving us those zones.
Yeah.
But when people see zones on things, whether it's VBT or heart rate training or whatever, in VBT, it's like 0.75 is the
gold standard,
lowest velocity. Yeah. Right. But you can't tell me that 0.74 is different than 0.75. Right. So you can tell me that 0.5 is different than 0.75, but the degree of difference, if you're in the zone below, it's just not biologically how things work.
Well, we see this with heart rate zones for, let's say, zone 2, right? So it was 220 minus your age times 70 to 75%, right? Was that? But then when we did max heart rate testing, we realized, or at least I realized very, very quickly, that the heart rate zone was way off. And so then ended up looking at like the MAP method and being like, all right, so 180 minus my age, that's my target. And then going to the Morpheus and actually doing the max heart rate test, where if you guys want to do a max heart rate test, ride for about 10 minutes at about a comfortable pace. And then, get off, take a little bit of breather for a few seconds, maybe 30, 40 seconds, then go on and do these 2-minute blasts as fucking fast as you can. Rest 2 minutes. And by about the third bout, 2 minutes, hammer, rest 2 minutes, hammer again. By about the third one, you're starting to get where you want. And then when you hit that fourth one, you just go for broke. And, I was over 192, 93. I was way over. For somebody, I should be in their 20s. And I realized, oh shit, my zones were just way too low. So I think with the VBT, the same thing. Also to tell a bit of a story, when Zengis first talked to me about compensatory acceleration in 1992, he talked about Fred Hatfield, and his thing was like, I want you to try to break these fucking weights. So, and where you break the weights isn't on the eccentric. You got to bring the bar down like you're trying to bring it to you, and you're trying to shatter these motherfuckers. And he said, when you bench, I want you to pick a spot 4 inches in front of where the bar is, and I want you to try to do it. And we did it with the squat. We did it with the deadlift, everything. Everything was like, I'm going to rip this fucking bar off the ground. And when I went out to go play football, then everybody was like, hey man, like your fucking punch is crazy. Like, I can't believe how hard you punch. And I'm like, well, a lot of people were just trying to place their hands. I was trying to put my hands 4 inches through people because that's what we had been training. And that compensatory acceleration, whether it came from hitting or what, like I think that moment when I was, 15 years old at Zengis, when he's talking about, compensatory acceleration, I want you to do this. I think that moment ended up ingraining something in me that ended up allowing me to play for a decade in the NFL. Your
karate was very strong.
Yeah. Zing, I'm forever grateful for my mentors. And that one was important. But I think that the thing that gets lost, because we did all the VBT stuff. And the thing that was fascinating, we got the Tendo, we had all the training groups. I had girls, I had guys. We were like, and this is where I kind of created a lot of, when you see the power athlete templates where we do a rep max and then we go back and we do CAT with a percentage, because I realized that we tested people, and then over the course, like the only time that I could get a static variable was either in that training session or maybe a day or two before. It had to be week to week. I had to adjust. So that's where a lot of that came from. But also the issue came down to is some people, the speed in the VVT wasn't a great indicator of maximal strength. We had certain people that could move a higher percentage of their 1RM at a greater speed, but couldn't lift as heavy a 1RM. And then we had other people that were just strong as shit that could lift heavy that just weren't that fast. So, then we have to say, like, what are we training for? Are we training athletes for sprinting in this? And I think BBT works there in terms of volume load and being able to kind of like self-regulate. But I also think using rep maxes is a pretty good way too. So, in terms of writing programs for thousands of people that you've never met, a daily matrix and being able to kind of do that more so than being like, it needs to be, 0.74 opposed from talking about intent. So I think if you learn compensatory acceleration and how to do it, it's easy to do VBT. If you learn velocity-based training without understanding CAT, I don't think it's as meaningful. So
yeah, and I think, because we do sit on, power athlete, we think about speed and power and things like that. But if you go into the powerlifting literature, they start doing VBT, but they're looking at like 0.15, 0.2. And,
maximal.
because that's maximal strength. And the problem, again, Brian did a great job bringing the velocity zones to the forefront. But if you look at those zones, the lowest zone is anything below 0.5. And it's like, just do the simple math. If you're moving at 0.2 meters per second, your squat rep is taking about 5 seconds. Yeah. If you're moving at 0.5 meters per second, your squat rep is taking about 1.5, 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And so just being in the weight room, it's like, like, man, if the weight is so heavy that it's taking me 5 seconds to do a rep, that's some heavy ass weight, right? And so when people get too hung up on those higher speed zones, they forget what it feels like to sit under heavy weight. Yeah. But with CAT, if the whole idea is like, man, I'm just trying to move as fast as possible, light, heavy, doesn't matter.
With intent.
Yeah, with intent, right? And so then it doesn't matter as much, because that 5 second squat's still going to take 5 seconds, but you're able to wire yourself to say, I'm driving as fast as possible, recruit those high threshold motor units as fast as possible, and try to move relatively fast. Now, if it's a maximal weight, that's going to be slow, right? But it's still relatively a fast contraction. And so I think that kind of gets lost in there as well. But all that being said, it's also kind of cool that we're at a point where the common person, just a general power athlete follower, is starting to think about this stuff. Like, I kind of take a step back and it's like, man,
this is awesome.
5 years ago, 10 years ago, the average Joe would never have thought about this stuff. So it's really cool that the average person is there, but we don't want to get caught up majoring in the minors, right? And you do a good job with your coach's notes of like, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to move fast. The other day with the bench press for the Eat the Weakness, you're like, we want 2 that are fast, 2 that are pretty quick, and then maybe 2 sets that are a little bit overreaching. And it's like, okay, so I have the velocimeter. I can measure my velocity, but that helps me calibrate. Like, okay, maybe 0.4, 0.5, like, and so,
what I found is that if you use CAT working up, like if we hit those 2 sets, it's usually like one, like you hit the first one, it feels like, oh, all right. You hit the second one, you're dialed. You add weight, third, and then the fourth one, you're like, bam, bam. Then you add that fifth and you're like, it's heavy. And then in your mind, you're like, all right, I know how this dance goes. Now I'm going to move this thing. And you should be able to hear that change ring. It's just, I think people, and dude, you brought it up great with Goodhart's Law, which reminds us that when you measure, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. In other words, if athletes start chasing velocity numbers, if athletes start chasing velocity numbers just to hit the metric rather than focusing on the intentional movement and adaptation, they risk losing sight of the actual training goal.
Well, and this is why it's so important for, I think, people to have some kind of arena of sport, whatever that is. If it's, I train jits a couple times a week, I go play pickleball in the city rec league, or I go for runs or whatever, because if you don't have some third party event that you're training for, then the training becomes your event, which is fine. Like we just talked about how we PR'd. Like we all want to get better at our training, but when training becomes the thing that you're targeting, it's real easy to slip into every day I need to PR. Yeah. And then it's like, that's not good training. Good periodization is not going to allow for that to happen. Right. And if you mentally are there, now you're going to start getting discouraged with your training. And if training is all you have, you don't have that sport or that activity, that's not a good place to be. And so we don't want to make training the thing. It can be a thing, but it shouldn't be the thing, because the whole goal is, even if it's absent of a sport, it's just your life, playing with your kids, like some other thing where it's like, I can kind of subjectively, maybe objectively, do better at this other thing, and my training is the vehicle that gets me there.
Well, Dr. Ben, what do you think about accommodating resistance as a way to teach people about CAT? Like chains, bands?
For the novice, I think it's overkill. I think they can get comfortable with the intent with just the barbell or the weights. In that case, with the novices, that's why I like including, low resistant throws, medicine ball throws, things like that, so they can really feel top end velocity, right? If I do it with an 8-pound medicine ball, do a chest pass as hard as I can, and now I go and bench press, that helps calibrate those ranges. But if they've been training for a while, I would tend to say I prefer chains rather than bands. And it's kind of counterintuitive because bands are a little bit more controlled, but I think the nature of the chain, how it gets heavier off the ground. I know bands increase tension, but it just, when I've used them myself, they just feel different. The band tension is always there, but the chains, if we're relating it to some real world sport or something like that, I feel like the chains have a little bit more of a real world feedback mechanism on them.
We used to call it chaos training. So that the chains caused chaos because they would deload and unload like in different ways. Two thoughts. Years ago when I went out to Westside, there was a dude that trained there named Bull. And when we were training with Bull, who was looked like a fucking bull, shaved head, goatee, fucking railed up big time, fucking Jack Street. He talked about chains make you brutally strong. The bands make you extremely fast and explosive. The problem, though, is the central nervous system takes a massive toll with the bands, whereas it doesn't happen the same with the chains. So the problem is that eventually, he said in powerlifting, they started with it and everybody got brutally strong. Then they went to the bands and it cooked everybody's nervous system. So he said there's got to be a balance of both. And then when I talked to Dr. Fred Hatfield, who created compensatory acceleration, first theorized it, I asked him about accommodating resistance. And the first time I talked to him, he shit on it. And it's like the Westside guys are fucked. They don't know what they're talking about. And the reason being is when he squatted his 1,000 plus, his 1,042 at 42 years old, he was using something called a torquemeter. So he was not measuring speed. He was measuring how much force. And I don't know what a torquemeter is. And I don't know what he came up with or how he created it. And he wasn't very descriptive on it. But he went to some science lab and they basically created some apparatus where he could measure the amount of torque and power or drive or force he was putting into the bar. And when he went in and he was doing his training, he never squatted 1,000 pounds in training. He was at like 850, 900, but he was doing it for like triples. And based upon the torque that he was putting into the bar, he was good for 1,200. So when he went into that contest, he had to walk out. He said, if I didn't have to walk that shit out, I could have squatted probably 1,100, 1,150. But he had to like walk it out. And if you remember seeing it, like there was pins, he had to waddle it back. But he hit that. I mean, it's fast out of the bottom. And so we talked about that torquemeter. And then when I talked to him about the velocity-based stuff, he's like, well, that's just bar speed. That's not how much intent and force. So there's a difference. So then the next time I talked to him, when we went down and did the on the long road with him before he passed away, I asked him about accommodating resistance again. And he said that they had just done a study where they had taken not beginner, kind of intermediate athletes, like taught them CAT and then used accommodating resistance. And he felt that there was a massive training stimulus where now all of a sudden it made force because the bar started slowing down on them. Right. So the bands and the chains, and I don't remember what he said they used for accommodating resistance. So we'll just say accommodating resistance. But he said as like the first rep they did as they were going down, as they started coming up and the band started to stretch and the chain started unloading, they started slowing down. And it was like the light bulb went on. It was like, oh, after, if I'm slowing down, I have to like drive force into the bar to speed it up. And so he said that there was like a very interesting window, and it wasn't a novice window, but it was like an intermediate kind of window where the accommodating resistance could be extremely valuable in the training to teaching them CAT. And then once they master it, then they could and then that was just like that phase and they could go into it. And if they ever got lazy or if they ever kind of forgot, they could always go back to using some accommodating resistance to kind of reset the nervous system, get them firing, get their memory back, but then putting them in. So he wasn't 100% sold on using it all the time, but he looked at it as like training blocks and like a novel stimulus to drop into the training. And he's like, there is value to it. So I have to take a step back on that one.
From what you just said, it seemed like the torquemeter was some kind of measurement, but it sounds a lot like VBT. But I think specifically to the point that we're deliberating on, is it wasn't necessarily important to measure unless his event was the squat.
Yes.
Like his end goal, because his sport was the lift.
Yeah. And now, because I know you guys have some force plates down there, for keeping it relative to VBT, an isometric is 0 velocity. Right. And so you can do some pretty jiggy stuff in terms of kind of, I think probably what Fred was doing with the torquemeter in finding kind of your ceiling by setting up an isometric on the force plates, or if you're at home in a garage and you don't have the means to get force plates, you can go on Amazon and get a crane scale that can go up to 600 kilos, which is more than probably anybody will lift. And you can set it up by a little chain, make a little wood platform. It's pretty simple to do, but then you can measure. Now, the key here is they're angle specific. So whatever angle you're setting yourself up at, it's specific to that angle. But then you can kind of measure what a 0 velocity would be. So you can set yourself up. The classic one is like an isometric mid-thigh pull where you set the bar up kind of mid-thigh, and that will show you the amount of force you can create kind of at the top of the deadlift or as you're coming out of the deadlift. But you can set it up for a squat as well, go all the way down to the bottom of the hole, do an isometric trying to push against it. And so that kind of stuff I think can help if people are trying to get a gauge on CAT as well, because with isometrics, the beauty is it's almost injury proof because you're not being dynamic. And then you can really lay into it. I mean, we would do some IMTP testing with some of the athletes, and the numbers for little guys and gals, actually, it's like the numbers they're putting up, it's like, that's so much force. So then it gives you an idea of like, okay, neurologically, I have this in my body, right? And so helps you kind of gauge like how much weight you can put on when doing CAT work or things like that. And so, yeah, if people want to mess with that, I think the crane scales are like $60 or something. I mean, it's not super expensive, but that's another kind of just a piece of information to help guide you. But also, when we talk about CAT or VBT, I think the biggest barrier for folks is admitting when it is too heavy, right? So like myself, for example, doing the bench the other day, my overreach, I did a couple overreach sets and I was like, let's try and throw a little bit more on there. And then it got too heavy that I couldn't be cat-like, right? It just, I was fatigued or whatever it was. And I think people need to build that kind of honest self-assessment, knowing that the intent of this work is not necessarily to go as heavy as you can go. The intent is to deliver that speed or that fast contraction into the bar. Because sometimes that cat work it's pretty light and that's okay, right? It's the intent for the day. You're not going to get weaker. You're moving as fast as possible, so you're still recruiting those high motor unit, high threshold motor units.
What about my pump?
What?
What about my pump? What if I don't feel a pump?
That's another
one. Valuable?
No, I mean, one of the guys in the Discord said, unless I feel like I have a massive pump, I feel like I didn't get anything done in the gym. And part of the reason that I sent that newsletter out on the pump is I read that and I was like, oh shit. Like the pump doesn't do anything for hypertrophy. What it is it's inflammation, but just because it doesn't drive hypertrophy doesn't mean it's not valuable. Right. It processes waste. It actually makes the muscles more like nutrient dense. I mean, there's all of these different things that the pump does that make it important. But like if it's strength, the pump's not driving strength. The pump's not driving hypertrophy, but it's creating a more advantageous environment for all of those things to take in. Like, for example, if you just go in the gym and you go in and do like sets of like 50 with the bands as fast as you can and just get a massive pump, like that's not really doing like you're not putting on muscle. Now, if you were to like lift some heavy fucking weights and do some heavy fives and hit that, and then go finish up some accessory with some eights, and then go, then at the very end hit some 30s and get a nice pump. Now you've basically like hit the spectrum in the training, and you're going to drive and do what you need to do. So I think the problem is that if the only receipt you have for whether or not you're getting jacked or training hard is a pump, I think that is a little misguided, and the reason I sent out that newsletter. So, I mean, just to give you guys listen on the radio, I read this Discord and I get all these questions and, look at all this information from thousands of people. And when I start seeing these common themes, so we were using the Discord, but then all of a sudden, like summer hit and the Discord kind of like activity kind of dropped a little bit. So I came up with this idea to just send out a newsletter. I'm like, we got 40,000 people on a contact list. Like, I'm just going to fucking send it to your e-box. Instead of you getting on the Discord, I'm just going to send it to you. So I started going through and looking at things like the pump and eccentrics versus concentrics, VBT and this and need and all these different things that we're constantly looking at and analyzing, and just being able to push it out and be able to provide this information to people so that now they're more educated. And instead of that guy going and being like, oh shit, I thought that I had to get a pump every time. After I read John's, From the Mind of John Wellborn, I realized that I need a pump, but I need to do the other stuff too.
Yeah, I think that's a good philosophy, right? Our bodies can do a lot of things. We can get a pump, we can tax our CNS, we can do all those things. And you probably should, throughout the week of your training, do all of that stuff at least once, right? But what we find ourselves, especially in the age where Instagram is and targeted influencers and things like that, we get so myopic on a single thing, right? On hypertrophy. And if it doesn't help hypertrophy, it's not worth the day.
That's Paul's deal. Paul's obsessed with hypertrophy, and his programs are all about hypertrophy. And it's like, okay, we know hypertrophy falls with this number, and this is what it all is. And I'm like, what about movement? What about athleticism? What about training at different rep ranges? And that's what was cool when I found that infograph, and I'll send it to you, for Chris Beardsley, where he showed about like the cascade and like the different rep ranges and how this does it. Like, I much rather like that in my training, where now I'm able to hit some like heavier, compound movements for some lower reps. I'm able to hit some accessory at kind of these medium, and then I'm able to do a little bit more accessory and some other things like some smaller movements, because smaller muscles recover faster than big muscles, which is kind of counterintuitive. Everybody thinks like, oh, like your triceps and biceps and your calves. I mean, smaller muscles can be trained with greater frequency just because they don't require as much. Bigger muscles like your, quads and hamstrings and back and, chest and something like those take longer to recover. So being able to kind of look at this and be like, all right, like, how are you balancing this training? Why is this? I mean, it's like, training your calves with heavy threes doesn't work. Your calves are have so much slow twitch fiber that it's like isometric hold, top and bottom, 25, 30 reps, being able to train them every day to be able to get them to move. Whereas the ton of fast twitch fibers in your hamstrings, things like, pulling some heavy RDLs, doing some throws, being able to put some focus stuff into the hamstring, the GHD is somewhat dynamic. I mean, that makes the hamstrings grow.
Well, so Dr. B, what about, as the research thrown out, the differences between myofibrillar and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy? Is that established, or?
It's kind of like what John's just talking about, right? It's myofibrillar. If we talk about the muscle, the single unit of the muscle is the myofiber. And so myofibrillar hypertrophy will grow those contractile units. And so that's kind of the overarching goal typically with hypertrophy, because as those units grow, they become stronger, you become stronger. And that takes a little bit longer, but longer lasting effect. But sarcoplasmic, that's the pump, pretty transient. And we know this. I mean, John essentially just a little bit laid out
I have a day called transient hypertrophy for a reason.
Yeah.
It's a recovery day where we just get some bodybuilding. You get a pump and it helps with recovery.
Yeah.
Well, and earlier when you were talking about getting a pump, you laid out my exact strategy when I send you guys progress photos on this, as I go and I get like 100 reps on some bands and then I take my photos because you get the pump. But plenty of us have been there where then an hour later we're deflated. Sure. And so it's just transient because it's just a fluid shift. Yeah. And that fluid shift happens for a few different reasons. But again, like John said, so it doesn't have lasting effects, but what that fluid is, That's blood and nutrients and oxygen and all of that going to the muscle in a time when the muscle needs repair. So if you can front end all of that pump work with some true strength training, you're going to flush all the good stuff into your muscles when they need it the most. And so, yeah, it's not lasting. So Arash, to go back to your question, it's not a lasting, sarcoplasmic isn't a lasting effect, but it's still of value. It's how we get, growth factors and things like that to the muscle in kind of a faster way. Now, over the course of 24 hours, you're still pumping nutrients to your muscles and stuff, but just that pump gives it a little bit more of a targeted approach.
So do you think my underwear progress photos are valid post-pump?
Oh, for tons of many more reasons than just this. I think they're valid.
I don't send any pictures with the pump. I send them first thing depleted in the morning.
Okay.
I'm just telling you.
Okay.
And the reason being is I'm sandbagging it. So what we'll end up doing is depleting, carbon it up. And but I'll tell you, when I stepped on the scale and I saw that 260, I was like, oh, thank God.
John's been sugar fasting.
No, we didn't. We were close.
We talked John off the cliff.
We were real fucking close. I got off that podcast with Jay Campbell. He sent me all of this shit and like, this is how I want you to do it. And everybody was like, hey, did he send it to you? I'm like, no, he didn't send it to me. But like he basically sent me all the parameters. I had to kind of put it together. But I got on with Ben and I was like, hey man, should we do this? Like just the last 2 weeks to do it. And Ben was like, no, let's not do it. And I think the reason being is Ben is a recovering raw vegan fruitarian.
Yeah.
You're in pain. You are a man in pain, Dr. B.
In fairness, John, what did I say? I said, let's finish this out doing it the power athlete way. Yeah. And then we can mess around with that. And that was mostly because, dude, I woke up today 221. Yeah. I haven't been 221 for years. And it's like, I'm afraid that getting 600 grams of carbs is going to bring on a whole bunch of water and that 221 is going to go away. Right. So I'm so afraid of letting go of that. But it's not off the table completely. Yeah.
I mean, we have the game plan. I think we should do it. The only thing I'm a little nervous about is I usually always wear like 38 to 40 shorts. I have to belt my 38s now.
Yeah.
So I'm like into 36s. So the fact that I'm, just under 6'6", 260 and change. I mean, I think I woke up depleted. I'm sure I'm up a little bit more. But the fact that I'm like a 36-inch waist, that's fucking, I haven't been a 36-inch waist since like forever, right? Yeah. And I haven't been under 260 since my senior year of high school. I think I showed up at like 258, 260 as a freshman in college. So I like to be this low is pretty shocking. And it's nice. I mean, like I had to go run an errand for DJ and like went and picked something up, and the dude was like, "Are you a body like what the fuck?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" So we were, I had to get some seals for this RAM, and I was like, "Oh no, we do some training." And the dude was like, just kind of giving me this like weird look, and I'm like, and then I realized that like there's just not a lot of people. Like I think I saw the other day that it's more common to be a millionaire than have a six pack, and if you're a millionaire with a six pack, there's like 4 people in Austin with it. Like I was like, fuck, man. Like so, and it's not as if. Like we were out of shape, right? That's, I think what's interesting is like, people are kind of like in this kind of gray zone, and then you really have to basically make a concerted effort. And I think something like Hammer 90, the Eat the Weakness of the Challenge, and, the shared suffering. And I feel like all the people that did the Eat the Weak Challenge ended up being okay. It was the people that didn't do the weights and didn't kind of get into it. Evan Esh's knee was fucked up, and I feel bad for him on that, so he wasn't able to do enough training. Marty kind of was on his own, and, John Walsh got hurt, and, but for everybody, for you and me and Matt and everybody that consistently did the program and kind of like kept the banter, I feel like we hit the mark where we needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and Arash did a pod a couple weeks ago, and I think Arash touched on it, but that is truly the biggest. I mean, the training's been great. Diet is obviously. I'm glad you guys like
the training, dude. I take a lot of pride, as you know, Arash. I take a lot of pride in like writing good training, and always as a chef, always being able to sample my own cooking and do it, and I do it, right along. So if I'm excited to do the training, and I get in there and I get the stimulus, like the one thing though, it's kind of funny. I didn't realize that for like rectus femoris, which is obviously the biggest muscle in the quad, it has to be a single joint. right? Like if you move 2 joints, it doesn't hit rectus femoris, which I think is interesting because then I'm always wondering why these CrossFit girls that don't do leg extensions have massive quads. It's got to be from like just monster air squats. But like, I think the interesting thing is, we have a leg extension kind of hamstring curl machine and we use it, but I've never really consistently used it as much as we did within this program. Just personally, I get in, I do some warm up, and every time I come in, I just kind of hit it. I got to the point where like now I'm able to do twice the weight that I want. I did like 15 or 20 reps, whereas like the quads got stronger, everything got stronger, knee pain went away. And like, I don't know if it's a combination of just being more focused in it, the training, systemic inflammation, the dieting, the body fat, or it could be just fucking everything.
I curse your name and Ben's name every time I do a Bulgarian drop set or a leg press drops. I'm like, do these guys not have any other hard things in their life to do? Why do you guys hate yourself so much? And then I'm like, John, why did we have to do a leg press drop set? He's like, Ben wanted to mix it up. Ben was like, oh.
Which is a lie because I don't tell Ben. I just basically send Ben the training. And then it's funny because I work on it on so I get up Saturday morning, I do my programming, make sure everything's dialed. I do it over the week, but like Saturday morning, I kind of get everything done because if there's one mistake, like if there's one, somebody is going to email me. Like for example, on Field Strong, I switched it to sprint 60 meters. And for some reason it kept like half gasser. And they were like, it says half gasser in 60. And I'm like, no problem. I'll fix it. And then the one guy's like, I read it last night. I was a little nervous. And then I saw it today and I felt much better. And I'm like, I get it. But so Ben will like text me at like 7, 8 o'clock at night. And he's like, hey dude, the Eat the Weakness isn't up. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot to publish it. Let me go do it. Yeah. And he's like, and then the other day he was like, well, what is it? I don't want to wait for you to go publish it. So I just sent it to him. And it was pretty funny, but it was, and it's just been basically like heavy compound, medium, 6 to 8 reps on the accessory, hitting a bunch of little different ones, some form of like lever where it'd be like a drop set. There's also another interesting thing too that I stumbled on with one of the articles that talked about hypertrophy as it relates to bilateral versus unilateral movements. That they felt that in the study that they did, that there was greater hypertrophy effect, like in terms of like a hierarchy, that if you train like a big compound movement, like let's say a squat, and then you go and you do the accessory with a single jointed movement, that there was a greater hypertrophy effect than following it up with another bilateral, which we do a lot in the programs, like a heavy mover, something. And then a lot of the accessory we do is unilateral, just because I felt that the effects, the training effects in hypertrophy and strength and everything, just in terms of control and balance and all the other stuff, were just dramatically better if I went from bilateral to unilateral. So I end up stumbling across that. And I'm like, fucking another feather in the cap for power athlete.
Well, and actually my favorite part, so to finish my thought earlier, Arash mentioned it a couple weeks ago, the biggest driver of this has been the community, has been either the outward shit talking and stuff, or just in my mind knowing that, John, Arash, Matt, like these guys are doing it too. So like if I got to do it, like otherwise I can't let them down. Right. So that's been huge. But in terms of the training, those Saturdays have actually been super awesome also, because now that we're getting so much stronger, like for those who don't know, the Saturdays are like some kind of conditioning piece, but we're pushing heavy sleds, doing some kind of ergometer, but we're also doing kettlebell swings. And I've had that 105-pound kettlebell in my garage for a while, and I would use it for kind of low volume stuff. But, now Saturdays we have those 150 kettlebell swings, like the strength that I've gained from the training. Now my conditioning is more intense because I'm swinging the 105 for the 150 reps instead of the 72. And the sled weight, I'm pushing 350 pounds plus sled weight instead of what started at like 275. So it's like, that kind of stuff. When we think about, again, everybody's like, oh, hypertrophy or strength. It's like, no, it all bleeds together. Yeah. My conditioning has taken off because now I'm stronger, and because I can condition better, my recovery is better, so I can get stronger again. And it doesn't fit in these silos.
The thing I noticed with the kettlebell swings when we do the high rep stuff, and this is just maybe the adaptation, I feel like in like where like my glute comes down to my hamstring, like the cut. Like for some reason, this area in the glute from like the low back down into there, like, and I think it's from, the way that I swing is kind of an RDL swing and then like the violent stand up. So you're constantly like going from this to this. But in terms of like back health and rotation and everything, like I feel really good. Like, I know we probably sound a little insane because we're all probably a little bit hungry and we're at the end of this thing. But in terms of just like physicality, outside of having to deal with fostering puppies, which has been a massive stress for me, I feel really good. So,
Grandpa,
yeah, we
Rod.
got one more week, right?
Did I tell you Nicky Rod showed me how to do a body lock pass? I actually asked him, and he had some really good tips.
Yeah,
and I was telling the guys, and they were like, basically got mad at me, like, we've shown you that exact same thing, and I'm like, no, you haven't. Not the way you did. You have to look
into his beautiful green eyes.
You know what I was amazed by, and this is just kind of funny for those of you guys that are in jiu-jitsu and know the B team. I thought he would be a much bigger dude.
Yeah.
He's got a pretty big upper body, looks pretty jacked. He is maybe like a 32, 34 inch waist. He is very small in the waist, not very thick in the legs, and I was like amazed at how little he was.
Cat-like choking machine.
Yeah. And then when he got my back, he couldn't get me, but that's probably because I just got a big back.
Well, Ben, when are you going to throw the gi on? When are you going to put on the rash guard and shorts? We're excited to see your new body in the rash guard and shorts. But
I can send you pictures of my new body whenever you want. But actually, no. So truthfully, my girls did the big target was swim lessons this summer, so they could learn how to swim. And our 6-year-old has a pretty good handle on it now. And so the next thing we're going to do, the local martial arts studio, they do youth taekwondo, youth jiu-jitsu, and the scheduling of it is right after the youth class is the adult beginner. Mm-hmm. And so my schedule works with that. So once I'm waiting to finish this training cycle up, so we have one more week, right? Yeah. And then I'm going to go head over there and start getting my ass kicked.
So kind of funny. I was somewhere recently and seeing a doctor. I'm not going to say who it is, but older doctor, older wife. He's like, oh, you know, my wife's a black belt in Taekwondo. She got it in 3 years. And I was like, wow, in your 60s, you started doing Taekwondo and you got a black belt in 3 years. And I was like, interesting. Like that was, and so like, I assume if somebody's a fucking black belt, I'm like, all right, if you're a black belt, like, I mean, you know, that means you got to like in jiu-jitsu, unless you're Derek Moneyberg, which I'm sure he's amazing. Like getting a black belt in 3 years, like doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So like, but the other thing with jiu-jitsu is if somebody like a Shanji or, you know, Steve or, Salo or, you know, anybody that, you know, falls within our lineage in jiu-jitsu gives you a black belt, like they own you, or not they own you, but they own that black belt. Like it's like you're part of their team. And so there's a certain standard that you have to hold. And I just remember thinking like, even if you went every single day, like there's no way that you could master a martial art in 3 years. Like that's only like, what would that be? Like 1,100 sessions, right? Like, okay, so 2,200 hours, that's not even anywhere near mastery.
And that's why to get the jiu-jitsu black belt takes about 10 years. And that's why we call them professor.
So, but yeah, I was thinking, and like in my head, I was like, I wonder if I snatch this lady by the wrist. Like,
and she high kicks you,
like what,
and knocks you out before you're able to grab her.
Then I would have been like, okay,
I would love to.
You have mastered kung fu. Yeah. Your taekwondo is strong. But like, what if you snatched her by the wrist and arm dragged her, and then just fucking literally just body locked her and smashed her? And I'm like,
well, that's interesting thoughts.
What was going through my fucking head.
That's why we're doing both, because I look at the two, and like for our 6-year-olds, like I think taekwondo, the structure of it, you know, learning the whatever they're called, the moves or whatever, I think that's one valuable thing for her on her discipline side. But the jiu-jitsu part is truly coming from like a self-defense. Like you're a girl, you need to be able to, like if someone gets close to you, you
need to feel comfortable with somebody.
I'll tell you what, the value of like the striking martial arts from a young age, you're just not going to be able to throw your limbs faster as you age. You have like kind of a biological limit. I think it's around age 10 or 11, where if you don't train in those velocities, you're never really going to learn how to move your body that quickly. So I think the value in the striking martial arts early on is going to be learning how to throw a kick, learning how to throw a punch, and you can always access that later to get better at it. I learned when I was super young, when I was 6 years old, and I can still throw a kick like I used to when I was a kid. So I don't know. Yeah. I think there's value in both for sure. I think jiu-jitsu is just easier to train every day at high intensity, and I've talked ad nauseum about jiu-jitsu on this podcast. So
Yeah.
Well, and she loves roughhousing. So it's like, hey, you can roughhouse
all
with
you
other
want.
people too.
Yeah. All you want at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. No, I think it, I think the jits, it teaches a lot of confidence. It teaches, a lot, but, yeah, man, I think when I hear the term, and maybe this is because, the Moneybird thing is so funny and we were sending so much stuff. For those of you guys not in the know, there's this guy named Derek Moneyberg, and he hired like Gordon Ryan and all these guys to come train him one-on-one. And he said that he did 3 hours of private training sessions 7 days a week for 3.5 to get, and then they gifted him a black belt. The problem is that like he's got some roles online, and it looks a little fishy. And but he's got some of the baddest dudes in the world that have co-signed on him. I mean, Gordon Ryan's trained with him and said this guy's legit. And so it just, and he's like, you guys are haters, but like BJ Penn got a black belt in like 3.5, 4 years, but he also went down to Brazil and won IBJJF Worlds, and they belted him on the deal. And then he went on and, one of the greatest, UFC fighters in history. So like his was actually proven on the mat, and there was no question. Whereas this guy's in like his own private studio. He's rolling with socks on, which is weird. He's like, everything's no gi. It just like, I don't know, just strange. And
well, you can't be a master unless you test yourself in the arena, right? Like you could at home be the best piano player ever, but if you get on stage and under the lights, you can't do it, then you can't call yourself a true master, right? So if you're not competing in the sport of jiu-jitsu, or at least
in strength and conditioning, right? Same thing, right? Like, like I'm sure for you as a professor, it helps to look the part. So, all right. So just to wrap up, we hit BBT versus CAT, so that'll be coming in a Mind of John Wellborn. We talked about protein recommendations, and we talked a little bit about hypertrophy strength, the pump, and really finished it up with what we talk about all the time, which is jits. And I just wanted to thank Mr. Arash Soofiani.
Very good.
And Dr. Ben Skutnik for jumping on this special edition of Power Athlete Radio, and actually a pretty awesome one because we haven't done a 3-way in a long time. So I'm always stoked to do them. So thanks guys for taking the time. See ya. And powerathletehq.com/training. Come see us if you want to jump on Jack Street or any of the training programs. See ya. This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by kofi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.